qualify this generally? There are certain times that you will not feel anything at all about any of these things that you read. It all depends on the time. Maybe with a cup of nice tea in your hand, relaxing at home, if you were to read this, if at all you read these kind of things when you are relaxing, you might feel certain things about this. But then, well, oh, okay. Now, what am I supposed to do, Ran? A huge monkey sound. Can we lock this? Is it possible to lock this? How do you? There's a whole sort of whole community of monkeys outside. Keep them out. How can you feel anything in this circumstances? So anyway, just imagine you really love this poem, okay? I can't pretend I like poetry much, but you need to get your marks and pass your exam, practical problems. I'm not supposed to say that I don't like these things, but then let me be honest, right? But then generally just tell me, is this optimistic or pessimistic in mood? It's clearly pessimistic, right? Why do you think she is pessimistic? If you know something about her background, the persona of this poem, and if you link that with Ran Singha, why do you think she is pessimistic in this sense? You just said something about the Holocaust experiences. Her experiences of violence, maybe? Yeah?
The horror of the past is still in her mind.
The horrors of the past are still there in her mind. That's exactly what the problem is here, right? So, basically, with that mood in your head, if you go back to the beginning of the poem, how does this poem open? Every morning I see him sitting in the speckled shade of my blossom-laden araliya tree, which I planted many years ago. It opens quite positively. It misleads you into thinking that this poem is going to be quite positive. Because at the beginning, it's about this, it's very peaceful. There is a shade under this Araliya tree. Araliya tree is specifically Sri Lankan here. So she uses specifically Sri Lankan images. And calm and quite peaceful at the beginning. But then this is a misconception. You are kind of misled. The reader is misled at the beginning to think that this is going to be peaceful. It is not going to be peaceful, right? And however, little by little, gradually, these positive images sort of melt into more negative images. If you go a little bit lower, under my tree, in a shadow of silence, he sits and with long skeletal hands sorts strands from a tangle of jute and fibers. So little by little, the picture is a little bit darkened. So shadow of silence. Earlier it was peaceful, now it's a shadow of silence, plus the image of the skeletal hands. Ominous. You know what you associate with a skeleton, right? The image. Skeletal hands spinning something. What does this symbolize? There is something going on here. This whole idea of skeletal hands spinning things. It's a very ominous sign. You're actually almost like predicting something. Something terrible is going to happen. This is the whole idea that this poem gives. It's moving from a certainly peaceful image to a less and less and less peaceful image. So if you move to the third stanza, now you have piling up of images that are ominous and negative in this instance, and seeing him sit day after day, sinister, silent, twisting his rope to a future purpose of evilness. So can you remember the earlier quotation by Yasmin Munaratna, that she couples up present horrors with past horrors? Here it's almost like coupling up of present horrors with the horrors of the past towards a horrific future. So all three time periods are enmeshed together in this section, right? Uh, future purpose of evilness. So her past had violence. Her present has violence. Will she expect anything other than violence from her future? If you take Anne Ranasinghe, she looks almost as if she's hopeless, because she, even in her second home, what does she meet with? The violence of 1983 riots, the ethnic violence, the horror, the death, all this. She's reliving her past memories in Sri Lanka as well, right? But she's not totally negative about her second home. In this particular instance, she's talking about the horrors of human civilization, right? I sense the charred wood smell again. What do you think these resonances are? Charred wood smell. Something is burning. This could either go back to the Holocaust and it could be basically gunfire, the smell of gunfire, the gas chamber being dead and scorched, your houses being lighted up, all that. It could be that. Plus what's happening right now, in the sense that right now is the moment, the present moment of the poem, right? The ethnic violence of the country. What happened? Do you know anything about what happened? You probably were not conscious of these things back at that time, right? So, but then there was a lot of violence going on, murder, horror, death, and then I could remember we used to switch off all the lights in the night and have these, I don't know, it's like these covered lights where you're not supposed to switch on lights in the night those days. So I can remember all those things. Maybe you don't remember any of that, obviously. So you should live in that era to understand how bad it was back then. Right, so she has a lot of resonances coming through in terms of the times in which she lived in Sri Lanka and all this violence that was going on. Stained glass exploding in the flames. A fireworks of fractured glass against the black November sky. What do you think fractured glass symbolizes here? Okay, it's broken. Violence is there, yes. Okay, there's brute force in this. You know, somebody has to do this. There's an agent who does this, who is behind this. There is an oppressor. The agent is the oppressor. It could be war, it could be Hitler, it could be somebody else. But there is always this figure of the oppressor who oppresses the others, right? And the streets deserted. I think this is surely a sort of reference to the times in which the ethnic violence and the JVP problems were in this country, you know, especially where people were not supposed to be on the roads after a particular time in the evening, and you're not supposed to switch on your lights, and you're not supposed to watch TV. All kinds of things were going on, right, at that time. And then all doors shut. It's like human civilization cannot go forward anymore. It has almost stopped because of all this violence. And then she is almost like saying, this is enough. I've had enough of this. Back there in Germany, I had enough. I come here, there is enough of violence here. What else can I hope for in my future than violence? Very roughly. I'm rushing, okay, because I just don't have time here. Okay? And then, specifically this idea of animal fear. What do you understand by that? It's very difficult for me to do a lecture like this. I never lecture like this. It's like, you know, we usually have discussions at uni, so we all talk. I never preach like this, stand in front and tell people what to think. We all sit and then just, you know, talk about things. It's very difficult for me to like, I keep asking these things from my students. So very difficult when I have this audience. I don't have audiences in my lectures. So anyway, animals fear? Please, sir.
People are dehumanized.
Okay, dehumanization is one of the main things that she utilizes. Marginalization. Dehumanization can be looked at in two different ways. Either one thing is you're like a demon, demonized. You don't have any human qualities. In either it means the same thing. The oppressor and the oppressed, both. The oppressor can be dehumanized in the sense that that person does not, or that force does not have any human qualities. It's like almost like a demon, not a human. Dehumanization of the oppressed, the person who is oppressed, is because that person is treated not like a human being but like an animal or a non-human being. So dehumanization in two different ways you can interpret it, right? Either in terms of the oppressor or in terms of the oppressed. Right, good. Okay. Please contribute like that, okay? And let me go on. And this image of the jackboot ringing hard and clear. What does that imply? What is a jackboot? What the soldiers wear. So once again, because especially in a poem, you can't say too much. It's a short piece of text. So you'll have to go for a sort of condensed version of your expressions. So because you can't go on into longer statements, that's why these people have to use images to evoke a lot. Otherwise, you'll be writing a short story or a novel on this, right? You have to kind of contain it. Therefore, you use images like jackboot or whatever to express a lot by using just one word, right? And then specifically underline these sections like lust for blood, all these things. I think obviously poetry, you'll have to be familiar with the whole poem. And going on, she says in the 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth stanza, what does this mean? That nothing is impossible, that anything is possible, that there is no safety in words or houses, that boundaries are theoretical and love is relative to the choice before you. What does this mean? Uncertainty is there, okay. Nothing is impossible, anything is possible. What do you think of that juxtaposition of the two phrases? Personally, I don't like it. I don't know why she has to say it twice. Maybe at school you are told this is there for exaggeration or the heightening and intensification of emotion. I'll say no, just say it once, that is enough. I know. So, but if I were to say that in my answer, I'll have to say, look, I'm not just going to say that once is enough for me. I'm also going to say why once is enough for me and why I'm contesting what the other people are saying. That's what you've got to do in your answers, okay? Say whatever you want to say within certain limits of sanity and say why you are saying those things. Right. Okay, and moving on to the last stanza very quickly. There is no safety in poems or music or even in philosophy. What does that mean? That's highly philosophical, I would say. She's trying to find some refuge in her artistic creations, but she's at the same time very practically aware that her aesthetical productions will not give her that relief, right? A lot of, literature or music or whatever, these art forms are there to have some kind of relief from your mundane lives, isn't it, for people? But then she's not very sure because she has experienced violence so much in her life, she is doubtful whether her art can actually release her from all these tensions. So she's not very clear about that, right? And eventually, the last line, scratched death mark on an oven wall, is my child's hand. What does she do here? She personalizes the entire poem into her at the end, or the persona, or Anne Ransing, or whoever. She personalizes the whole thing. When you say it's my child, you know that the bond between a child and a parent, it's almost like you are losing your own child in this violence. So a huge amount of loss is conveyed through this poem, right? So that's as much as I can do at this point. I hope that will be a point of departure from where you can try and understand the poem in multiple ways. Okay, Sylvia Plath, please somebody read this until I gain my breath. Sylvia Plath is also quite depressed in one word. So, and I'll trouble you again because you don't have time. How am I supposed to erase this? I think the monkey took it. So, let's see. Yeah, please, can you read this?
swallow immediately, just like a bee, unmuted by love or dislike. I am not cruel, only truthful. The eye of a little bird, four corners. Most of the time I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink, with petals. I have looked at it so long I think it is part of my heart, but it flickers. Spaces and darkness separate us over and over. Now I am awake. A woman bends over me, searching my ritual for what she really is. When she turns to me, those eyes, the candles or the moon, I see her back and reflect it gracefully. She rewards me with her tears and an agitation at times. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me she has found a young girl, and in me an old woman who rises her day after day like a terrible fish.
Okay, right, thank you. Before we move on to the poem, just a little bit about the poet. So just like in Anne Ransinger's case, even Sylvia Plath had bouts of depression, and she had a lot of negative experiences in her life, and she died very young because of suicide attempt. No, not suicide attempt. There was an attempt earlier, and then eventually she succumbed to her suicide attempt around 1963. But she died quite young. And then she also did not have a very peaceful background, as it were, in terms of her works. You see that her father dies when she was only 8 years old. So that is supposed to have had this huge impact on her life. Losing your father, your one of your parents, is not an easy thing, right? Sometimes different people react to these tragedies of their lives in different ways. Some people are strong, some people are weak. So she probably, you could say that she was quite weak, and these experiences probably went into her creations, where she was really intensely negative in much of her work. Not only this work, but she was very intense in her feelings, but intensively negative in her feelings that her works evoked, right? And basically, if I were to characterize her background in one word, it would be anxiety and stress. Who's that? Not a monkey, I think. Yeah. So, also, after she got married, what happened? You know anything about the background? What did the husband do to her? Betrayal, once again, right? So, see what happens in her life in terms of the men in her life. She lost the father very young, and then you trust your husband next, I suppose, and then he betrays you. So obviously the anxiety that began at childhood, it continued into her later years, and if you are not a very strong person, you can succumb to your anxieties. This is what happens exactly in her case. So in her works, as I said earlier, she's very intense in her emotions. She uses a lot of imagination, but quite negative energy, right? Uses quite a lot of negative energy, and her main subjects are suicide and breaking of relationships. If you had read her other works, have you read her other works? Bad question to ask from you guys. Okay, so she would write about relationships that break, mistrust, doubt, disloyalty, suicide, death. These are her themes. So basically, you see that both these writers are trying to find some kind of relief through their works, because if not in this sense, they'll have to find some relief in some other way. And she did. She thought it was relief to die, so she committed suicide, right? And there was also these traits of self-contempt. She was never satisfied with herself, her image. That's exactly what comes through in this poem. Your image, your appearance, starting from your appearance, your identity, you are not really happy about yourself. Self-contempt was there in the poems. And there were very graphic, violent images in many of her works. Not in this one, I suppose. And she would also write of homicide, murder, death, and a lot of her works were based on suffering, right? And there was also something called black humor that she used. What is that? It's almost like a paradox, isn't it? Black humor, negative humor. Very basically, it's something like this. If your the villain in the story, at the moment of his or her killing somebody, comes out with a particular humorous expression that expresses his or her villainy plus the horrendousness of the deed, but some, humorous aspect also within the situation. That's called black humor in a gist, okay? A very basic example. So she would use black humor also in her works, and she would also write on marriage. I'm sure she would not have written anything positive about marriage because her experiences were bad. And she also was very satirical or sarcastic about conventional marriage, because marriage as it stands today in society is an institution, right? You've got to sign on this paper, utter these words, and you're supposed to be married. And living together is supposed to be bad. So what is legitimate, what is not, it's up to you to decide. Whether it becomes more legitimate because you sign in front of somebody that you don't know, or I don't know. So, anyways, let's skip from there. Yeah, we'll move on to the poem. So tell me, first of all, what are the associations that you make with the word mirror? Reflection is the first thing that comes into your mind. It's like a copy, reiteration, repetition of a self. Reiteration is a big word for repetition. You want to write big words and impress people, you can use reiteration without saying repetition, right? So when you say reflect, you are talking about a copy, no? You are having a copy, duplicate of something in front of the mirror. It's not exactly the same thing that is reflected, is it? Is it exactly you that is reflected inside in front of the mirror? I don't think so. There's something else that comes in between yourself and the reflection on the mirror, right? So, and okay, copy of what stands in front. And so, can you remember earlier I said that she had self-contempt. Let's see whether self-contempt comes out in this poem. And the mirror speaks at the beginning, so you know this whole paraphernalia about personification, right? The mirror is personified. I'm silver exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately. Just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike, I am not cruel, only truthful. Sometimes people say to be truthful would be cruel. Sometimes they say if you think that by lying you are trying to do something good to a person, that will be better. Some truths might hurt. Some truths might be cruel, but the mirror doesn't think so. What does that mean? The mirror seems to be saying, he or she or it, that I am not trying to cover up the reality. I am just trying to present to you what reality is as it is, without anything coming in between. I am not bothered about being polite or not polite. I am just telling you what things are, right? So, for example, transience, aging. Can you hide? Can you hide yourself or move away from growing old? You cannot. But why are we so bothered about applying, what are these creams that you have that they advertise on TV? Fair and lovely, that is to make you fair. Sudumelli. Yeah. What are the other things? Age reversing creams. Age reversing creams. So if we all know that we can't reverse age, what are we doing then? Are we really, is there something wrong with our society that tells you, look, it's bad to age, so therefore we are producing these creams and stuff to make you young, even though we all know that we all grow old and will die one day. So, are we confused? Is our society confused? Where something is wrong somewhere. That comes out in this poem as well. You could read it like that, right? Especially in terms of the mirror. The mirror won't lie to you. Without your makeup, without your anti-aging cream, if you go in front of the mirror won't lie to you. But society might. They might say, look, use this, then you'll look good. That's society telling you a lot of lies. But the mirror says, I'm trying to be quite truthful and I'm trying to show you reality as it is. Right? Okay. What is this eye of the little god? You can interpret these things in different ways. There is no one answer. Eye of the little god. Probably the mirror thinks that it is the eye of the god in a sense. That it has some divine knowledge about human beings to show them reality. Maybe you could take it that way. You could read this in several ways. That's just one way of reading it. And then if you move on to the second stanza, now I am a lake. You could even take this as the surface of the lake, as a mirror. When you look down, you can see your reflection. A woman bends over me. Now here we come to the most interesting and the most significant part of this poem. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. Then she turns to those liars, the candles or the moon. What is this exactly? Discovering of yourself. It sounds very nice to say that term. What does it really mean? To discover yourself? Who I am? You say I am all the time, right? But what does it really mean when you say I am?
You are not satisfied with who you are.
Yeah, you are searching for some kind of satisfaction in your own image. Okay, that is also there. Self-discovery, what does that mean to you? Have you discovered your good selves? So far, no. And you think it's a really big mistake that you started doing literature for A-levels, because now you have to go do your examination in literature. I don't know. That is also part of your self-discovery. Maybe right now if you feel this is really not the thing for me, that's a part of discovering yourself. Maybe something else is meant for you. But if some of you think right now, I'm so glad I selected this field, that's also part of self-discovery. Maybe earlier you didn't want to join this, but now you are okay with it. It all depends on what you feel about yourself. So it's something similar that is happening here. When you read anything, try to relate it to yourself. Otherwise, there's no meaning in it. Even if this poem was written like 10 centuries back, try to bring it to this century and right now and to yourself and see whether it makes any sense to you. If it really doesn't, there's no point in looking at the thing. You know? So when you answer your poetry section in the exam, write on something that you can relate to. Otherwise, don't just parrot notes out, because your attempt is not going to be genuine and the examiner knows it. Write on something that you are involved in. If you don't feel like writing about this, don't. Do something else. Right? So what is this whole thing about? Showing reality and the liars. What is this juxtaposition that is made here? So it's also about transience and aging, right? You can't stop yourself from aging. The mirror tells you that you are an old woman right now when you look at yourself, according to this poem. But where does the lie begin? If the mirror tells you the truth, where are all your liars? Probably the cream manufacturers. No, this is in a light-hearted manner, but there is some truth behind that, isn't it? Truth or reality would be that you do age, you do die, you grow old, right? But what are these societal lies that you want to believe in? Will you buy these creams if you did not believe that something good might come out of them? So you're using anti-aging, not you right now. You are 19. When you are around 39, 49, yeah, you'll be actually considering those things. So, so there is a huge market for these products. Why so? If you know the reality, you want to believe the lies. You are running away from reality. Is that the case? That's what I'm asking. Knowing all this, why do you still go for these things? And they have like the biggest markets in the entire globe, these fashion products and all that, isn't it? Especially these age reversing kind of thing. So why do we still go for those things, even though we know that this is not exactly what's going to happen? That dichotomy, that whole contrast between actually knowing what's going on and but going behind a lie is what is posited here in the last section of this poem. So specific relevance to women, because in society today, as it was back in Austen's time, you see, women have this huge constraint that is set upon them by society to be pretty, to be slim, or to be of a particular figure, to fit this stereotypical pretty person, isn't it? More than men, I suppose. This whole idea of being beautiful, or this whole idea appearance, pleasing appearance is put upon a lot of women than on men, I suppose. But now the stress is on men as well. They are fair and handsome, right? So, but through culture, the stress or the constraint or this whole requirement was placed upon women from the beginning, right? It was a requirement of society. Maybe that's why we are like this right now. We all go for fashion things and whatever it is. These constructs, our tastes are not exactly our own. We are constructed like this by society to want certain things. We may not really want to be slim, but because society tells you, look, you can look attractive only if you are slim, we feel okay, we need to go on a regime, we have to control our meals, we have to go slim. What are these constraints? If society were not powerful, will you be doing these things? You will do what you want to do. But where is this you? You is a socially constructed product. We are all, our tastes, our likes, dislikes, much of our personality is learned behavior. We learn how to be like this. So it's not our fault also, right? To go buy your cream or whatever, it's not our fault basically. Entirely, it's not our fault. It's a part of society that expects certain things from men and women. So men are supposed to behave in a particular manner, women are supposed to behave in another manner. What are these things? Social constraints. They tell you how to behave, they tell you what to be. Maybe those are the lies that the mirror is talking about. Look, but beyond all these, there is something that you can't contest against. Eventually, old age and death. Whatever you do, can you contest those two? So they would be the ultimate realities of your life. Old age, growing old, not being able to perform well, not being able to walk eventually, not being able to talk, eat, and eventual death. So our entire human civilization, culture is more about not being able to understand and handle these realities. Whether you know it or not, you want to dwell in these imaginary reflections of beauty and being young even though you are like 59 or whatever, right? All these ideas. Illusions, right? So here, in general, if I sum it up, this poem is about a juxtaposition of reality versus illusion in that sense. And how illusions constrain your personality. Illusions tell you what to do. Whether you know it as illusion or not, people as people go behind these lies, norms, cultural expectations, even though you know what reality is all about, right? So it's a discovery of the self as a woman also, because specifically woman has this whole social acceptance only if she is pretty, something like that, right? So you can do a gendered reading of this poem. More than any other thing, a very gendered reading can be made of this poem, because especially it's a woman who's involved in this activity, right? Um, and I have this other poem that is starkly different from this. I'll just read this out, because there are other women who approach this whole idea of illusion and reality in a different sense. Now, here, the woman in this poem, in Mirror, she is worried about growing old. She does not celebrate herself as a self. She's so worried about these illusions and lies of society. She's so worried about making or building an image that goes with the prototype that is set down by society. But there are other women who wouldn't, who sort of go away from that. This is by a person called Sojourner Truth. This is an African American woman, former slaves of America. This is a celebration of womanhood, celebration of being a strong woman, which is totally different from the earlier one. I'll just read this as a conclusion. This is in vernacular, okay? African American vernacular, AAVE. It's not standard American English. And the title is Ain't I a Woman? Okay? So this is how it goes. That man over there say a woman needs to be helped into carriages. It's like the chivalrous code in Austen, right? And lifted over ditches. And to have the best place everywhere. This is a sort of some kind of strike against chivalrous behavior where open doors for women, and you consider women to be so fragile, but African American women are not fragile, they're very strong, right? Nobody ever helped me into carriages or over mud puddles or give me a best place. She was a former slave, okay? And ain't I a woman? Look at me, look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man, when I could get to it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children, and seen most all sold into slavery. And when I cried out to mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? That little man in black dare say, a woman can't have as much rights as a man, cause Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, together, woman ought to be able to turn it right side up again. So, totally different mood, totally different mood. I like this better than the other one because that is almost like a lament, no? It's sort of so pessimistic. And here this has a lot of optimism in it, a lot of power also. And very simple words, but very complex messages conveyed, right? I should just keep quiet for 15 minutes now. So the next session starts in another 10 minutes. Okay. Are you all staying for the next session? Robert Trust and Sitaka? Okay. Shall we try opening the door? I can see the monkeys.